The air pressure changed first. Ray's Caldero felt it against his skin. A shift in the room's density as bodies moved through doorways. He couldn't see from where they'd positioned him. The vinyl chair beneath him was cold, clinical, and bolted to the floor. Someone had designed this space to keep people trapped in place, and he hated every molecule of it. White walls, fluorescent lights that buzzed vibrations through the ceiling tiles. He tracked the tremors with his fingertips pressed flat against the armrest, reading the building's pulse like Morse code. 3 people in the hallway, 2 walking heavy guards, probably syndicate, 1 lighter, hesitant. That would be the nurse. They were talking about him. He knew because none of them had looked at him since he'd been escorted inside. Rays watched their mouths through the vertical window in the door. The older woman, gray hair pulled back tight, was shaking her head. Her lips moved fast, clipped. The guard closest to her shrugged, then turned away, dismissed. The universal gesture of men who didn't want to deal with complications. His jaw tightened. 26 years of reading rooms, and it never stopped feeling like drowning in slow motion. The door opened. He felt the air displacement before he saw movement. His body's early warning system, the only one that had never lied to him. A younger nurse entered first, eyes down, carrying a metal tray. Behind her, another figure, smaller frame, rounded belly pressing against soft cotton scrubs. Pregnant. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Ray's attention locked onto the second person before he could stop himself. Male. Omega. The scent wasn't strong yet, but the visual cues were unmistakable. Curved hips, delicate wrist bones. The way he moved through space like he was apologizing for taking up room in it. Dark skin, close-cropped hair, eyes the color of burnt caramel. And those eyes were staring directly at him. Not past him, not at the floor, at him. Rays straightened in the chair. The Omega didn't flinch, didn't lower his gaze, just stood there holding a clipboard like it was a shield, studying Ray's face with the kind of focus people usually reserved for puzzles they intended to solve. The older nurse, Mara, according to the name tag clipped to her chest, gestured toward the examination table. Her mouth moved, shaping words Rays had seen 1,000 times. Sit, wait, cooperate. He didn't move. Mara's expression tightened. She turned toward the Omega, lips forming a question. The Omega responded with something short, 2 syllables. Then he set the clipboard down on the counter and crossed the room with surprising confidence for someone who'd walked in looking terrified. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that Rays could see the fine tremor in his hands, far enough that it wasn't a challenge. The Omega lifted both hands slowly, palms open. Then he signed, clumsy, outdated, but recognizable. Do you understand me? Ray's breath caught in his throat. No one had asked him that in 15 years. Not since his father had made it clear that accommodation was weakness, and weakness got you buried in syndicate politics before you turned 20. People either shouted at him like volume solved everything, or they wrote messages in sharp, impatient handwriting. But they never asked. He signed back, sharp, precise. Yes. The Omega exhaled. Relief flickered across his face, and Rays hated how much that small reaction unsettled him. This wasn't how assignments worked. The syndicate didn't send people who cared. They sent leverage. They sent problems wrapped in pretty paper. Mara was watching them now, arms crossed. Her mouth moved again. Faster this time, directed at the Omega. Rays caught fragments. Routine. Protocol. 20 minutes. The Omega nodded, but he was still looking at Rays. Still waiting. For what? Mara gestured again, more insistent. The examination table. Standard procedure. Rays had been through this enough times to know the script. They'd check his blood pressure, draw samples, run tests that didn't need explaining because no one expected him to ask questions. He was the Caldero heir, a weapon with a pulse. You maintained weapons. You didn't negotiate with them. He stood. The movement was controlled, deliberate, designed to remind everyone in the room that he was 6'3" and built like the enforcers his father kept on payroll. The younger nurse stepped back reflexively. The Omega didn't. Rays walked to the table and sat. the paper covering crinkled beneath him, another texture his body cataloged automatically. Mara moved into position at his left side, pulling on latex gloves with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. She reached for his arm. The Omega moved faster. He didn't touch Ray's. He touched Mara's wrist, gentle but firm, and shook his head. Then he pointed at the blood pressure cuff hanging on the wall, then at himself. His mouth shaped a single word. Me. Mara's face cycled through 3 emotions in 2 seconds. Confusion, irritation, resignation. She stepped back, stripping off the gloves with a snap that Ray's felt through the table's metal frame. The Omega took her place. He moved carefully, the way someone approaches a stray dog that might bite. But his hands were steady now as he reached for the cuff, and when he wrapped it around Ray's bicep, he maintained eye contact the entire time. "This will squeeze," he signed with one hand. "It won't hurt." Ray's nodded once. He didn't trust his hands to sign anything more complicated than that. The cuff inflated. Pressure built against his arm. Tight, constricting, a sensation he'd learned to tolerate because fighting it only made things worse. The Omega watched the gauge, lips pressed together in concentration. When the cuff released, he wrote something on the chart. Then he reached for Ray's wrist to check his pulse. That's when Ray's felt it. Not the touch itself. He'd been touched by medical staff more times than he could count. But the Omega's fingers were warm, and they rested against his skin 3 seconds longer than necessary. Long enough that Ray's pulse kicked up, and the Omega definitely felt it because his eyes widened slightly before he pulled his hand back. Neither of them moved. Mara said something from across the room. The Omega responded without looking away from Ray's. His mouth moved slowly, shaping words with exaggerated precision. "Are you okay?" Ray's hands moved before his brain caught up. "Why do you care?" The Omega blinked. Then something shifted in his expression. Something that looked dangerously close to sadness. He signed back slower this time, making sure Ray's caught every word. Because no one else asked. The air in the room changed again. Thicker, heavier. Ray's chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with the examination. He opened his mouth, not to speak, because sound had never been his language, but because the alternative was sitting there drowning in whatever this feeling was. Mara moved toward them. She was holding something small and silver. Tweezers, maybe, or a probe. She gestured for the Omega to step aside, but he didn't move immediately. He was still watching Ray's, still waiting for an answer to a question that hadn't been fully asked yet. Then Mara's hand came up toward Ray's left ear. He felt her fingers brush the skin behind it, a touch so light he almost missed it. But then she froze, completely. Her entire body went rigid, and the tweezers clattered against the metal tray with a sound Ray's felt as vibration through the table. The Omega turned toward her. His mouth formed a question. Mara didn't answer. She was staring at the side of Ray's head like she'd just seen a ghost, and her hand was shaking so hard the light caught the tremor. Ray's pulse spiked. He twisted to look at her, but she'd already stepped back. Her mouth was moving, fast, frantic, and the Omega's face had gone pale. What did she see? Mara grabbed the Omega's arm and pulled him toward the door. He resisted, eyes locked on Ray's, signing something quick and messy that Ray's couldn't parse. But Mara was stronger than she looked, and the door swung open with enough force that Ray's felt the vibration rattle through the floor. They disappeared into the hallway, and Ray's was alone in a room that suddenly felt 10 degrees colder, with the metallic taste of adrenaline flooding his mouth and a single question burning through every nerve in his body. What the hell had she found? What do you think Mara discovered behind Ray's ear that made her freeze? Drop your theories below. The memory always started with his father's hand. Not holding, gripping. Fingers wrapped around Ray's 7-year-old wrist like a shackle, dragging him through the marble hallways of the Caldero estate toward the medical wing. His father's mouth moved constantly, yelling, probably, based on the vein pulsing in his neck, but Ray's only felt the vibrations through the floor. Heavy footsteps, expensive shoes hitting stone. He'd learned to read anger through movement before he understood what anger was. The doctor's office smelled like antiseptic and leather. Reyes remembered that part clearly because scent was one of the few senses he had that worked the way other people's did. The doctor, tall, white coat, silver hair, had smiled at him with too many teeth. The kind of smile adults used when they were about to do something that would hurt. His father shoved him into a chair, left the room. The door closed with a thud Reyes felt in his sternum. The doctor pulled out a needle. Reyes had fought, obviously. 7-year-olds didn't understand strategy yet. They just knew that needles meant pain, and pain meant you ran if you could, screamed if you couldn't. But he couldn't scream, not in any way that mattered, and running only meant his father's hand would find him again later. So he'd held still while the doctor injected something into the soft tissue behind his ear, once on each side. The burn spread like fire under his skin, and then everything got fuzzy. When he woke up, the doctor was writing notes. His father was signing a paper. Money changed hands in a leather envelope. No one explained what had just happened. They never did. Reyes blinked, and the clinic room snapped back into focus. White walls, fluorescent lights, the faint chemical smell of disinfectant that never quite covered the underlying scent of fear. He was 14 years older now, but the chair felt exactly the same. Bolted down, inescapable. He pressed his palms flat against his thighs to stop the tremor. Control was everything. His father had taught him that much, even if he'd taught him nothing else worth keeping. The syndicate respected power. Power required control. And control meant never letting anyone see the cracks. But Mara had seen something. The door opened again. Reyes' head snapped toward it, body coiled tight. The Omega stepped through first this time, moving slower than before. His face was carefully blank. Too blank, the kind of empty expression people wore when they were working very hard not to show panic. Behind him, Mara entered with a tablet tucked under one arm and a look that could have stripped paint off walls. She didn't sit, didn't gesture toward the examination table. Just stood there staring at Reyes like he was a crime scene she was trying to reconstruct in her head. The Omega moved between them, deliberate, placing himself in Mara's line of sight. He signed something short toward Reyes, wait, then turned to face the nurse. His hands moved in the air, too fast for Reyes to follow, but Mara was shaking her head. The argument was silent on Reyes' end. All he could track was body language. The Omega's shoulders were tense. Mara kept jabbing one finger toward the tablet. The Omega crossed his arms. Mara's face flushed red. Then the Omega did something Reyes didn't expect. He turned his back on Mara entirely and walked straight to Reyes. No hesitation, no apology. He stopped close enough that Reyes could see the faint shadows under his eyes and the way his jaw was set like he'd made a decision that scared him, but he was doing it anyway. He pulled a pen from his pocket, clicked it once. Then he reached for Reyes' hand. Reyes let him. The Omega's palm was warm against his knuckles as he flipped Reyes' hand over and started writing on his skin. The ink was cool. Each letter formed slowly, pressed firm enough that Reyes could feel the shapes. Scarring. Surgical. Old. Reyes' breath stalled. The Omega kept writing. Behind both ears. Deliberate placement. Reyes pulled his hand back. Stared at the words bleeding into his skin. Surgical. The burning sensation when he was 7. The needles. His father's signature on paper he'd never been allowed to see. His pulse hammered against his ribs. He looked up at the Omega, then passed him to Mara. Her expression had shifted from anger to something worse. Pity. He hated pity more than violence. Reyes' hands moved fast. Sharp signs, no room for misinterpretation. What does it mean? The Omega glanced back at Mara. She hadn't moved. Didn't seem like she planned to. So the Omega pulled the pen out again and wrote across his own forearm this time. Held it up so Reyes could read. Cochlear blockage. Reversible. The words didn't make sense. Reyes read them 3 times, and they still felt like a language he didn't speak. Reversible. As in something that could be undone. As in something that had been done in the first place. He shook his head. Signed again. I was born like this. The Omega's face did something complicated. He looked at Mara again. Longer this time, and whatever silent conversation passed between them made his shoulders drop. Then he wrote one more line, slower, making sure every letter was clear. No, you weren't. Ray's stood up so fast the chair scraped backward. The sound, the vibration, rattled through the floor, and both Mara and the Omega stepped back reflexively. But Ray's wasn't moving toward them. He was trying to move away from the words written on his own skin, trying to put distance between himself and the idea that someone had chosen this for him. His father. Had to be. Who else had access? Who else had the money, the connections, the complete disregard for consent? The Omega was signing now. Small, careful movements. Sit, please. Ray's didn't sit. He braced one hand against the examination table and focused on breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The technique his first combat trainer had taught him when panic attacks started interfering with his ability to fight. You can't control sound, the trainer had written, but you can control your body. Except he couldn't control this. Couldn't control the way his thoughts were spinning out, reconstructing every interaction he'd ever had with his father through this new, sick lens. The impatience when Ray's didn't respond fast enough. The doctors who never explained. The way his father's friends looked at him, not like he was disabled, but like he was a project that hadn't quite worked out. Mara was talking to the Omega again. Ray's caught movement in his peripheral vision, saw her hand the tablet over. The Omega took it, scrolled through something, then his face went very still. He turned the screen toward Ray's. Medical records. Old ones, scanned images of handwritten notes. Ray's name at the top, his father's signature at the bottom, and in the middle a single typed line that made his stomach drop. Procedure authorized. Auditory suppression via surgical blockage. Permanent placement approved for behavioral control. Behavioral control. Like he was livestock. Ray's vision tunneled. The edges of the room blurred, and all he could see was that phrase. Behavioral control. They'd cut into him twice behind each ear, in the places where sound was supposed to reach his brain, and they'd done it to make him easier to manage. The Omega's hand appeared in his line of sight. Not touching, just there, present. Ray's looked up. The Omega's eyes were steady, and there was no pity in them now. Just something that looked uncomfortably close to understanding. He signed slowly. One word at a time. You didn't know. It wasn't a question. Ray's shook his head anyway. They never asked, the Omega signed. That's the part that matters. Ray's hands trembled as he signed back. What now? The Omega glanced at Mara. She nodded once, then held up the tablet again. Pulled up a different file. This one had diagrams. Medical illustrations of an ear canal. Areas highlighted in red. The Omega wrote on Ray's arm again. His handwriting was shakier now. Reversal possible. Risky. Syndicate can't know. Ray's laugh came out silent. Just a sharp exhale through his nose. The Syndicate. Of course. If they found out he could hear, if they found out he'd chosen to hear, it would crack the foundation of everything they'd built his reputation on. The silent enforcer. The man who didn't need words to make people afraid. But if he didn't do it, he'd spend the rest of his life knowing someone had stolen something from him before he was old enough to fight back. The Omega was watching him. Waiting. Ray's picked up the pen. Wrote across his own forearm in block letters. When? The Omega's eyes widened. Then he smiled, small, cautious, but real. He took the pen back and wrote one word. Soon. Behind him, Mara was shaking her head. She signed something sharp and fast, but the Omega ignored her. He was already pulling out his phone, typing something Ray's couldn't see. Then he held the screen up. I'll need to run tests first. Baseline auditory function. Imaging. You'll have to come back. Ray's nodded. He'd come back. He'd come back every day if that's what it took. The Omega typed something else. Hesitated. Then turned the screen around again. Why are you agreeing to this so fast? Ray's took the phone. His thumbs moved slowly over the keyboard, picking out each letter with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to type before he learned to sign. Because you asked. The Omega read it. His breath caught, just barely visible. Then he typed back. That shouldn't be enough. Ray's typed faster this time. It's the only thing that ever has been. The Omega stared at the screen for 5 full seconds. Then he looked up at Ray's, and something in his expression shifted. Softened, like he just realized they were both standing in the same trap, just from different directions. He typed one more message. I'm Kian, by the way, since we're apparently doing this. Ray's almost smiled. Almost. Instead, he took the phone and added one line. Ray's, and yes, we are. Kian pocketed the phone. Then he did something that made Mara's eyes go wide. He reached out and deliberately, incorrectly, signed the word for tomorrow. But the hand shape was wrong. The movement was wrong. Everything about it screamed intentional mistake. Ray's eyebrows lifted. Kian's mouth curved into the smallest smirk. He'd done it on purpose, testing something, proving something. That he saw Ray's as more than a problem to solve. Mara threw her hands up and walked out, muttering something Ray's felt as door slam vibrations. Kian waited until she was gone. Then he signed one more thing. Correct this time. They should have asked you first. Ray's throat tightened. He nodded once because if he tried to sign anything right now his hands would shake too much to be coherent. Kian turned to leave, stopped at the door, looked back, and asked a question no one in Ray's entire life had ever thought to ask. Do you want this? Ray's answer came faster than thought. Yes. Kian smiled. Then he left, and the door closed with a soft click Ray's felt through the floor. And for the first time in 19 years, Ray's wondered what his own voice sounded like. Should Ray's trust Kian this quickly? Or is he walking into another trap? Share your thoughts. The restricted wing wasn't supposed to be accessible to Omegas. Ray's knew this because he'd approved the security protocols himself 3 months ago when the Syndicate's medical facility expanded into the East Building. Alphas only, enforcers, people who'd signed blood contracts and proved they could keep their mouths shut even when threatened with worse than death. So when the door to exam room 7 opened and Kian walked in holding a stack of files like he owned the place, Ray's first instinct was to assume someone was about to die. His second instinct, quieter, more dangerous, was relief. Kian froze when he saw Ray's. The files nearly slipped from his grip. His eyes went wide, and Ray's watched his throat work as he swallowed. Then Kian glanced back at the hallway, at the guard who should have stopped him, and his expression shifted into something between panic and resignation. The guard wasn't there. Kian stepped fully into the room and let the door close behind him. He stood there for 3 seconds, breathing too fast, before he seemed to remember how spines worked and straightened up. He signed quickly. I'm not supposed to be here. Ray's almost laughed. He signed back. I know. Kian's shoulders dropped half an inch. Are you going to report me? Ray's considered it. Procedurally, he should. Omegas in restricted areas meant security breaches, and security breaches meant someone on his staff wasn't doing their job. But Kian was holding medical files with Ray's name on the tab, and the curiosity was stronger than protocol. He shook his head. Kian exhaled, set the files down on the counter with shaking hands. Then he signed again, slower this time. The guard left. I told him I needed to check something. He didn't question it. Of course he didn't. Kian was pregnant, soft-spoken, and probably used that combination like a weapon when he needed to. Smart. Ray's gestured toward the files. What did you find? Kian hesitated, bit his lower lip. Then he opened the top folder and pulled out a sheet of paper covered in dense medical terminology. He laid it flat on the counter and pointed to a highlighted section. Ray's moved closer. Close enough to see the fine print. Close enough to smell the faint trace of lavender soap on Kian's skin. He forced himself to focus on the paper. The highlighted section was a pre-surgical consent form, dated 23 years ago, signed by his father, and underneath the signature, a single line in the doctor's handwriting. Guardian assumes full responsibility. Patient unable to consent due to age. Patient unable to consent. He'd been 3 years old. Ray's jaw locked. He reached past Kian and flipped to the next page. More notes. More procedures. A timeline that stretched from age 3 to age 7, documenting every injection, every surgical adjustment, every follow-up appointment. They'd been working on him for 4 years before the final blockage was placed. 4 years of turning him into what they wanted. Kian's hand appeared in his peripheral vision, not touching him, just resting on the counter near his. Close enough to be an offer without being a demand. Reyes pulled back, put distance between himself and the paperwork and the implication that he'd never had a choice in any of this. He turned toward the window, reinforced glass, tinted so no one could see in from the street, and pressed both palms flat against the cool surface. Behind him, he felt Kian move. Slow steps, careful, the kind of movement someone used when approaching a cornered animal. Reyes' reflection stared back at him from the glass. Dark eyes, sharp jaw, the same face his father had, though everyone pretended not to notice the resemblance. And behind his ears, hidden under hair that he kept long enough to cover them, were scars he'd never questioned because no one had ever told him to question anything. Kian's reflection appeared next to his, smaller, rounder, hands moving in the space between them. "I'm sorry." Reyes shook his head, signed without turning around. "Don't. They should have. I know what they should have done." Reyes cut him off. "Doesn't change what they did." Kian went quiet. Reyes counted to 30 in his head, using the rhythm to steady his pulse. When he finally turned around, Kian was standing by the counter again, hands folded over his stomach in that protective way pregnant omegas did when they were stressed. Reyes signed slowly. "Why did you come here?" Kian's hands moved fast. "Because you deserve to know." And because he stopped, started again. "Because if I'd found this in anyone else's file, I would have told them too." Honest, painfully honest. Reyes didn't know what to do with that. He signed again. "What happens now?" Kian pulled out his phone, typed something, then turned the screen toward Reyes. "I need to map the blockages. Imaging scans. It'll take about an hour. Mara can do it, but she's not here today." Reyes raised an eyebrow. Signed. "So who's doing it?" Kian's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Me. If you'll let me." There it was again. Permission. Asked instead of assumed. Reyes studied him for a long moment. Kian didn't look away, didn't fidget, just stood there meeting Reyes' gaze with a steadiness that felt almost aggressive in its gentleness. Finally, Reyes nodded. Kian exhaled. "Okay, I'll need you to lie down." Reyes moved to the examination table, sat first, then swung his legs up and reclined slowly. The paper crinkled beneath him, a sound he felt through his spine. The fluorescent lights above were too bright. He closed his eyes, felt Kian move closer. The first touch was clinical, fingers against his temple, adjusting his head position. Then Kian's hands moved to his hair, gently pushing it back behind his left ear. Reyes' breath hitched. No one touched him there, ever. The staff knew better. His father had trained them to know better. But Kian's touch was careful, methodical. He wasn't treating Reyes like he was fragile, just like he was human. Reyes opened his eyes. Kian was leaning over him, focused entirely on the small scanner he'd pulled from a drawer. He pressed it against the skin behind Reyes' ear, and Reyes felt the faint vibration as it powered on. Kian's free hand rested on the table near Reyes' shoulder, not holding him down, just there. The scan took 6 minutes. Reyes counted each one, tracking time by the rhythm of Kian's breathing and the subtle shifts in air pressure as he moved around the table. When Kian finally stepped back, he was frowning at the scanner's display. He typed on his phone, showed Reyes the screen. "The blockages are surgical implants, biocompatible material. They're not causing damage, but they're completely blocking the cochlear pathway." Reyes sat up, signed. "Can they be removed?" Kian's hesitation was answer enough. He typed again. "Yes, but the surgery is delicate, and if the syndicate finds out, they won't." Reyes signed. Hard. Final. Kian's eyes narrowed. "How can you be sure?" Reyes took the phone, typed slowly. "Because I'll make sure the only people who know are the ones I trust. And right now, that's you and Mara." Kian read it. His expression did something complicated. Then he typed back. "You don't even know me." Reyes typed faster. You asked permission before touching me. That's more than anyone else has done in 10 years. Kian stared at the screen, his hands curled around the phone, knuckles going white. When he looked up, his eyes were damp. That's not enough reason to trust someone. Reyes reached out, slowly, gave Kian time to pull away. When he didn't, Reyes tapped the phone screen and added one more line. It's the only reason I have left. Kian's breath shuddered out. He set the phone down on the counter like it weighed 50 pounds, then pressed both hands against his face. His shoulders shook once, twice. Reyes didn't move, didn't try to comfort him, just waited. When Kian finally dropped his hands, his eyes were red but dry. He signed instead of typing this time. I know medical sign language. Reyes blinked, signed back. I noticed. Kian's mouth twitched. I learned it in nursing school. Thought I'd never use it. Most facilities just use interpreters now. Why didn't you tell me before? Because I wanted to make sure you knew I was listening. Kian signed. Not just translating. Reyes' chest did something uncomfortable. He looked away, focusing on the files still spread across the counter. When can we do the surgery? Kian's hands stilled. Then he signed slowly. You're serious? Yes. Could fail. You could lose what hearing potential you have left. I'll take that risk. Kian crossed his arms. Why? Reyes stood, walked to the counter, picked up the consent form with his father's signature and held it up. Because this wasn't my choice, he signed with one hand. And I'm done letting other people decide what I'm capable of. Kian stared at him for a long time. Then he nodded once and pulled out his phone again. He typed quickly, showed Reyes the screen. I'll talk to Mara. We'll need to schedule it off-site. Somewhere the syndicate doesn't have access to medical records. Reyes nodded, typed back. I'll handle the location. Kian pocketed the phone. Then he did something unexpected. He stepped forward and placed his hand flat against Reyes' chest, right over his heart, palm warm through the fabric of Reyes' shirt. He held it there for 3 seconds, then pulled back and signed. Your heartbeat is fast. Reyes' mouth curved despite everything. He signed back. Yours is faster. Kian's face flushed. He turned away quickly, gathering the files into a messy stack. I should go before someone notices I'm missing. Kian. He stopped, looked back. Reyes signed carefully. Thank you. Kian's expression softened. He signed back. Don't thank me yet. We haven't done anything. You asked? Reyes signed. That's everything. Kian's eyes went bright again. He nodded once, then turned and left before Reyes could see if the tears actually fell. The door closed, and Reyes stood alone in the examination room, hand pressed against his own chest, feeling his heartbeat like it was the only proof he had that any of this was real. Do you think Kian has hidden motives? Or is he genuinely trying to help? Let us know what you think. The safe house smelled like dust and old wood. Reyes had chosen it specifically because no one from the syndicate knew it existed. Not even his father's most trusted enforcers. It was a relic from his grandfather's era, buried in property records under a shell company that had dissolved 15 years ago. 3 rooms, peeling wallpaper, windows that didn't lock properly. Perfect. Kian had arrived 20 minutes early, carrying a canvas bag that clinked with medical supplies and looking like he hadn't slept in 2 days. Probably because he hadn't. Reyes had seen the messages. Late-night research, questions sent to colleagues Kian trusted, frantic notes typed into his phone about surgical risk factors and post-operative care. Now they sat across from each other at a rickety kitchen table, Kian's notebook open between them, and Reyes realized this was the first time they'd been completely alone. No clinic staff, no guards, no syndicate shadows watching from hallways. Just 2 people who barely knew each other, planning something that could destroy them both. Kian wrote something in the notebook, then slid it across the table. His handwriting was surprisingly neat for someone whose hands kept shaking. Mara can do the procedure. She has the equipment, but she wants to talk to you first. Make sure you understand the risks. Reyes pulled the notebook closer, wrote underneath Kian's message. What risks? Kian took the pen back, wrote faster this time. Infection, nerve damage, partial hearing loss instead of restoration, tinnitus, sensory overload. Your brain has adapted to silence for 26 years. Sound might feel like violence at first. Ray's read it twice, wrote back, "Sounds better than this." Kian's expression flickered. He wrote again, pressing hard enough that the pen nearly tore through the paper. "I'm serious. You could come out of this worse than you went in." Ray's took the pen, met Kian's eyes while he wrote, "I'm already worse. At least this way it's my choice." Kian stared at the words. His jaw worked like he was chewing on a response he couldn't quite articulate. Then he stood abruptly, walked to the window, and braced both hands against the sill. Ray's gave him 60 seconds. When Kian still hadn't moved, he stood and crossed the room, stopped a few feet behind him, close enough to be present, far enough to not crowd. Kian's shoulders were rigid. Ray's could see the tension in every line of his body. The way his spine curved protectively around his belly. The way his fingers dug into the rotting wood like he was trying to anchor himself. Ray's tapped the floor with his boot. Once, twice. The vibration would tell Kian he was there, even if he couldn't see him. Kian turned. His eyes were dry, but barely. He signed without looking at Ray's face, focusing somewhere around his collarbone instead. "I'm scared." Ray signed back. "Of what?" "That we'll do this and it won't work. That you'll blame me." "I won't." "You don't know that," Kian signed, faster now. "You don't know what you'll feel when it fails. Or if it works and you hate it. Sound isn't always." He stopped. Started again. "It's not always good." Ray's watched Kian's hands shake through the signs. He thought about all the ways this could go wrong. About the possibility that he'd wake up from surgery with nothing changed, or worse, with new problems stacked on top of old ones. About the fact that Kian was right. He didn't know what sound would feel like. Couldn't know. And that uncertainty was its own kind of terror. But the alternative was living the rest of his life knowing someone had chosen his silence for him, and he'd been too afraid to take it back. He signed slowly, made sure Kian caught every word. "I'm not doing this because I think it will fix everything. I'm doing it because for the first time someone is letting me decide." Kian's hands stilled. He looked up, finally meeting Ray's eyes, and something in his expression cracked open. Not pity, not sympathy, understanding. He signed back. "Did you ever want to hear?" The question hit harder than Ray's expected. He'd spent 26 years not thinking about it, not letting himself think about it, because wanting something you could never have was its own kind of violence, and he'd had enough violence for 3 lifetimes. But standing here, in this falling apart safe house with an Omega who kept asking questions no one else had the courage to ask, Ray's realized the answer had always been there, buried, ignored, waiting. He signed carefully. "I don't know." Kian's eyebrows lifted. "You don't know?" "No," Ray signed. "Because no one ever asked me what I wanted. They just decided. And after a while, I stopped asking myself." Kian's breath caught. He pressed one hand against his stomach. An automatic gesture, protective. And Ray's wondered if he was thinking about the baby. About choices and consent and all the ways people could take control away from someone before they were old enough to fight back. Kian signed again. "If you could go back. Before the surgery. If someone had asked you then, would you have said yes?" Ray's thought about it. About being 3 years old. About his father's hand on his wrist. About needles and doctors and the way pain had become normal before he understood what normal was supposed to feel like. He signed slowly. "I was 3. I didn't know what hearing was. I didn't know what I was losing." "That's not an answer," Kian signed. "Yes, it is," Ray signed back. "Because the point is no one asked. Not then. Not ever. Until you." Kian's face did something complicated. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closed it. Signed instead. "I don't know if that's enough. It's more than I had yesterday," Ray signed. They stood there in silence. Ray's kind of silence, the kind he'd lived in all his life. But it felt different now. Less like isolation and more like a choice they were both making. To stay, to wait, to figure out what came next without rushing toward it. Finally, Kian pulled out his phone. Typed something. Showed Ray's the screen. The baby moves when I'm stressed. I can feel it right now. Ray's looked at Kian's belly. Then back at his face. Typed back. Is that bad? Kian's mouth curved into a tired smile. He typed again. No, it's just distracting. Makes it hard to think about anything else. Ray's hesitated. Then typed. Can I feel it? Kian froze. His eyes went wide, and for a second Ray's thought he'd crossed a line. But then Kian nodded slowly and took Ray's hand. He guided it to the side of his belly, pressing Ray's palm flat against the fabric of his shirt. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Just warmth. The curve of Kian's body under his hand. Then movement. Small, quick, like a flutter under the surface. Ray's breath stopped. He looked up at Kian, who was watching him with an expression that made Ray's chest feel too small. Kian signed with his free hand. That's them. Ray's didn't move. Couldn't move. He'd touched 1,000 things in his life. Weapons, walls, people he'd hurt and people he'd protected. But this was different. This was life. Fragile and insistent and completely unaware that it was being felt by someone who'd spent his whole existence learning not to feel anything at all. The movement came again. Stronger this time. Ray's hand shifted automatically, following it, and Kian's breath hitched. They stayed like that for longer than was probably appropriate. Ray's hand on Kian's belly. Kian's hand covering Ray's. The baby moving between them like proof that something new could exist even in the middle of all this broken. When Ray's finally pulled back, his hand felt cold. Kian typed on his phone. Showed him the screen. You're the first person who asked. Ray's typed back. People should ask more. Kian smiled. Small. Real. The kind of smile that didn't have anything to do with politeness or fear. Then he typed again. Mara wants to meet tomorrow. To go over the procedure. Are you ready? Ray's looked at Kian. At the notebook on the table. At the safehouse walls that felt less like a prison now and more like a place where choices could be made without consequences crashing in from the outside. He typed slowly. I don't know if I'm ready, but I'm doing it anyway. Kian read it. Nodded. Then he typed one last message. That's the only kind of ready that matters. They left the safehouse separately. Kian first, slipping out through the side door with his bag of medical supplies and a promise to text Ray's when he got home safe. Ray's waited 10 minutes, then followed. The city was loud the way cities always were. Cars, people, construction noise vibrating through concrete. Ray's felt it all through his boots, through his skin, the same way he always had. But for the first time in his life, he wondered what it sounded like. And for the first time in his life, he thought maybe he'd get to find out. What do you think will happen when Ray's finally hears sound for the first time? Share your predictions below. The envelope arrived at 3 a.m. Ray's knew because the security system's timestamp flashed across his phone screen, pulling him out of the half-sleep he'd been stuck in for the past 6 hours. Someone had bypassed the front gate, walked straight to the main house, left something on the doorstep, and disappeared before the cameras could get a clean angle on their face. Professional. Ray's was dressed and downstairs in 90 seconds. The envelope sat on the stone step like a threat wrapped in paper. Unmarked, sealed with wax that bore no insignia. He picked it up carefully, checking weight and thickness. No device, no powder, just paper. He took it inside, locked the door, opened it standing 3 feet back just in case. A single document slid out. Medical records. His medical records. But not the ones Kian had found. These were different, older, pages he'd never seen before, stamped with a private clinic's logo that didn't exist anymore. And on the top page, a handwritten note. You should have left it buried. Ray's pulse spiked. He flipped through the pages, scanning dates and procedure codes. These weren't just records of the cochlear blockage. These were everything. Every injection, every test, every authorization signed by his father. And underneath it all, a trail of payments. Large ones routed through offshore accounts, to doctors who'd retired early or disappeared entirely. Someone had kept copies. Someone who knew exactly what had been done to him. And now they were watching. Ray's pulled out his phone, texted Kian. Don't come to the clinic today. Stay home. The reply came fast. Too fast for someone who should have been asleep. Why? What happened? Reyes stared at the screen. Weighed his options. He could lie. Say it was syndicate business. Keep Kian out of it until he figured out who'd left the envelope and what they wanted. But Kian had asked for honesty. Had earned it by being the first person to ask instead of assume. Reyes typed slowly. Someone knows. About the records. About the surgery. They left a warning. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then Kian's response. I'm coming over. No, you don't get to decide that. Reyes' jaw tightened. He typed back. It's not safe. Neither is letting you deal with this alone. I'm already dressed. Send me the address. Reyes wanted to argue. Wanted to remind Kian that he was pregnant. That syndicate politics were vicious even on good days. That whoever had left this envelope wouldn't hesitate to use him as leverage if they knew he was involved. But the alternative was sitting here alone, staring at documents that proved his father had spent 23 years erasing Reyes' ability to choose anything for himself. He sent the address. Kian arrived 37 minutes later. Reyes watched through the security feed as he parked 3 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance on foot. Smart. No direct connection if anyone was tracking vehicles. Kian's hood was up, hands shoved in his pockets, moving fast but not running. Reyes opened the door before he knocked. Kian slipped inside, breathing hard. His eyes went straight to the envelope on the table. Let me see. Reyes handed it over. Watched Kian's face change as he read through the pages. Shock first, then anger, then something colder. Kian set the papers down carefully. Signed instead of speaking. This is leverage. Reyes nodded. Someone wants you to stop. Kian signed. Or they want to control how the information gets out. Or both. Reyes signed back. Kian pulled out his phone. Typed quickly. Showed Reyes the screen. Do you know who sent it? Reyes shook his head. Typed back. Could be anyone. My father's people. Rival families. Someone inside the syndicate who wants me destabilized. Kian's jaw tightened. He typed again. What do they gain from exposing this? Reyes thought about it. About the way syndicate power worked. About reputation and fear and the fragile balance that kept families from tearing each other apart. If people knew he'd been surgically altered as a child, if they knew his deafness wasn't natural, it would raise questions. About consent. About his father's methods. About whether the Caldero family could be trusted to lead when they'd built their heir through manipulation instead of strength. He typed slowly. They gain chaos, doubt, reason to challenge my authority. Kian read it, then typed back. So we don't give them that. Reyes looked up. Kian's expression was hard in a way he hadn't seen before. Not scared, not hesitant, determined. What do you mean? Reyes typed. Kian put his phone down. Signed instead. You control the narrative. Release the information yourself. Before they can weaponize it. Reyes' hands stilled. That's insane. Is it? Kian signed. Right now they have power because you're reacting. What if you took it back? By admitting my father, Reyes stopped signing. Started again. By admitting what he did. Yes, Kian signed. By showing them you survived it. That you're doing something about it. That you're stronger than whatever they tried to make you. Reyes stared at him. At the Omega who'd walked into his life 2 weeks ago and somehow convinced him that 26 years of silence could be undone. Who was now standing in his house at 4 a.m., pregnant and exhausted, telling him to burn down the foundation of syndicate politics because it was built on lies anyway. He signed slowly. If I do that, the syndicate will turn on me. Some of them, Kian signed. Not all. And the ones who don't are the ones worth keeping. You're talking about a purge. I'm talking about honesty. Kian signed. Something they've never had to deal with from your family before. Reyes' laugh came out silent. Sharp. He turned away, pacing to the window. Outside, the city was dark except for streetlights and the occasional car passing through intersections. Quiet. The kind of quiet he'd lived in forever but never chosen. Behind him, he felt Kian move closer. Not touching, just present. Reyes signed without turning around. What if it doesn't work? Kian's response came in his peripheral vision. Then we try something else. We? Yes, Kian signed. We. Ray's turned. Kian was standing close enough now that Ray's could see the shadows under his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly when he signed. He was terrified. Ray's could read it in every line of his body. But he was here anyway. Ray's signed carefully. Why are you doing this? Kian's hands moved slowly. Because I know what it's like when people make decisions for you. And I know what it costs to take that power back. Ray's wanted to ask what he meant. Wanted to know what had happened to Kian before the syndicate had sent him here as leverage. But Kian's expression had closed off. Not cold, just guarded. And Ray's recognized the look of someone who wasn't ready to share yet. So instead he signed, "Thank you." Kian's mouth curved. "Don't thank me. We haven't done anything yet." Ray's pulled out his phone, opened his messages, found Mara's contact, typed slowly, "We need to move the surgery up. How soon can you be ready?" The reply came 2 minutes later. "Give me 48 hours. Why? Ray's typed back. "Because we're out of time." He showed the screen to Kian. Kian nodded, then pulled out his own phone and started typing something long and detailed. When he finished, he showed it to Ray's. "I'll stay here until the surgery. If someone's watching you, they're watching me too. Safer if we're together." Ray's read it twice. "You don't have to do that." Kian typed faster. "I know. I'm doing it anyway." Ray's looked at him, at the determination in his eyes, at the way he kept one hand pressed protectively over his belly even when he was typing with the other, at the fact that he'd just upended his entire life to help someone he barely knew, and he still thought Ray's was the one taking the bigger risk. He typed one more message. "The guest room is upstairs. Second door on the left." Kian smiled. Small, tired, real. Then he typed back, "I'll need decaf coffee in the morning. And something with protein. The baby gets cranky otherwise." Ray's almost laughed. Typed back, "I'll make sure the kitchen is stocked." They stood there in the early morning darkness, two people who shouldn't have trusted each other but did anyway, planning a surgery that could change everything or nothing. And for the first time since the envelope had arrived, Ray's felt like maybe chaos wasn't the worst thing that could happen. Maybe it was the only way forward. Kian turned toward the stairs, then stopped, looked back, signed one more thing. "Whatever happens, I'm glad you asked." Ray's signed back, "I'm glad you stayed." Kian's expression softened. Then he disappeared up the stairs, and Ray's was alone with the documents spread across his table and a decision that felt simultaneously like surrender and the first real choice he'd made in his entire life. He picked up his phone, stared at the message thread with Mara. Then he typed one more line. "I'm ready." He hit send before he could second-guess it. Outside, the city stayed quiet, but inside his chest, something was starting to shift. Not sound, not yet, but the possibility of it, the hope of it, and that was louder than anything he'd heard in 26 years. Do you think Ray's should expose the truth himself? Or is he walking into a trap? Let us know your thoughts. The first sound Ray's heard was his own heartbeat. Not felt, heard. A rhythmic thump that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, pulsing through his skull like something alive trying to break free. His eyes snapped open. The ceiling blurred into focus. White tiles, fluorescent lights dimmed to a pale glow that still felt too bright. Mara's face appeared above him. Her mouth moved, and for the first time in his life, Ray's saw the movement and heard something at the same time. Distorted, underwater, but sound. His chest seized. The heartbeat got louder, faster. Or maybe that was just panic. Kian's hand pressed against his shoulder. Warm, grounding. Ray's turned his head. Too fast. The world tilted, and saw Kian's mouth forming words he couldn't understand yet. But there was sound attached to them. Soft, blurred, like listening through walls. Ray's tried to sit up. Mara's hands pushed him back down, gentle but firm. Her mouth moved again, and this time Ray's caught fragments. Syllables that didn't connect into meaning but existed as distinct pieces of noise. His brain couldn't process it. 26 years of silence, and suddenly the world had texture he'd never asked for. The fluorescent lights hummed. He could hear them, a mechanical buzz that vibrated through his teeth and made his jaw ache. Footsteps in the hallway. He heard those too, each one a sharp impact that felt like someone tapping directly on his skull. Fabric rustling. Kian scrubs as he moved closer. The sound was crisp, too crisp, like his ears were raw nerves exposed to air. Ray's hands came up to cover his ears, but Mara caught his wrists. She was saying something. He watched her mouth, tried to match the sounds to the shapes. 2 syllables. Short. Clipped. Not yet. Or maybe that wasn't what she said at all. Maybe his brain was inventing language because it didn't know what else to do with input it had never received before. Kian's hand found his. Squeezed once. Ray's focused on that. On touch. On something familiar. He turned his head slowly this time, and Kian's face came into focus. His mouth moved carefully, exaggerating each word. Breathe. Ray's tried. Inhale. Exhale. But even his own breathing had sound now. Ragged, harsh, too loud in his head. Everything was too loud. The room was a chorus of noise he couldn't organize, couldn't filter, couldn't escape. His vision started to tunnel. Mara's hands moved to his face, tilting his head toward her. She was signing now. Thank God she was signing. This is normal. Your brain needs time. Normal, right? Normal to feel like his skull was cracking open from the inside. Normal to want to rip the surgical dressings off and claw out whatever they'd put inside him. Kian signed with his free hand. Count with me. Ray's locked onto Kian's fingers. Watched him sign numbers slowly. 1, 2, 3. Each sign deliberate, grounding. Ray's copied them, matching rhythm, using the familiar patterns to anchor himself while his brain screamed at the invasion of sound. 4, 5, 6. The heartbeat in his ears started to slow. Or maybe he was just getting used to it. He couldn't tell anymore. 7, 8, 9. Mara moved away. Ray's tracked her through peripheral vision, watched her check monitors he couldn't see. When she came back, she was holding a tablet. She typed something, then showed him the screen. Surgery successful. Both implants removed. Cochlear pathways intact. Your hearing. Ray's read it 3 times. Hearing. The word felt foreign even as his ears continued to assault him with proof. He took the tablet, typed with shaking fingers. Everything is too loud. Mara nodded, typed back. It will be for weeks, maybe months. Your brain has to relearn how to filter. Can you turn it off? She hesitated, then typed slowly. No, but we can help you manage it. Ray's wanted to throw the tablet across the room, wanted to demand they reverse it, put the implants back, return him to silence that didn't feel like torture. But Kian's hand was still in his, and Kian was watching him with an expression that wasn't pity or fear, just presence. Kian took the tablet, typed something, showed Ray's. Do you want me to stay? Ray's answer came faster than thought. He typed 1 word. Yes. Kian nodded, settled into the chair beside the bed, hand still wrapped around Ray's. And despite the chaos in his head, despite every sound feeling like knives scraping against bone, Ray's held on. Because for the first time in his life, he could hear another person breathing in the same room. And it was the most terrifying, overwhelming, impossibly real thing he'd ever experienced. Will Ray's brain adapt to sound? Or did the surgery create more problems than it solved? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. Drop your thoughts in the comments and inspire others with your perspective. The memo arrived while Ray's was still learning what his own voice sounded like. 3 days post-surgery. He'd progressed from hearing only chaos to distinguishing individual sounds. Doors closing, water running, Kian's footsteps on hardwood. His own voice was the strangest, deep, rougher than he'd imagined. The first time he tried to speak, Kian had smiled, and Ray's had heard that too. The small intake of breath before the expression formed. Now Kian stood in the doorway holding a tablet, and his face had gone pale. Ray's pulled out one of the earplugs Mara had given him. The world rushed in. Ceiling fan, traffic outside, his own pulse. He signed. What's wrong? Kian crossed the room. handed over the tablet without speaking. The email was addressed to someone in the syndicate's medical division. Forwarded, redirected, eventually sent to Kian's encrypted account by someone who'd signed it only as M. Ray's read the subject line first. Authorization records, Caldero R. His stomach dropped. The email body contained scanned documents, authorization forms, payment receipts, correspondence between his father and 3 different doctors spanning from when Ray's was 3 to age 7. Every procedure documented, every payment tracked, and at the bottom, a summary written in clinical language that made Ray's hands shake. Subject underwent systematic auditory suppression via bilateral cochlear blockage. Procedure authorized by legal guardian for purposes of behavioral modification and enhanced operational control. Subject displayed alpha-dominant traits that, if left unmanaged, could compromise syndicate hierarchy. Suppression deemed necessary for long-term asset stability. Asset stability. Ray's read it again, then a 3rd time. The words didn't change. He looked up. Kian was watching him, one hand pressed against his belly. His mouth moved, and Ray's heard fragments. Soft syllables that might have been his name. Ray's pulled the earplugs out completely, let the full weight of sound crash over him. Kian's voice came through clearer now. Ray's, talk to me. His own voice felt clumsy in his mouth. Who sent this? I don't know. The encryption is syndicate level. Whoever sent it has access to internal files. Ray's stood. The room tilted slightly, still adjusting to the sensory overload, but he steadied himself against the desk. They kept everything. Yes. My father authorized this when I was 3 years old. His voice cracked on the last word. He heard it crack. Heard the weakness in it and hated that sound now meant he couldn't hide. Kian moved closer. The syndicate elders would have known. Your father couldn't have done this alone. They all knew. Ray's hands curled into fists. Every single one of them watched me grow up knowing what they'd taken from me. That's why someone sent this now, Kian said quietly. They know you had the surgery. They know you can hear. This is a warning. Ray's looked at him. A warning about what? About going public. About challenging the system that created you. Kian's voice was steady, but Ray's could hear the tremor underneath. Hearing gave him that now. The ability to catch fear even when people tried to hide it. What do they think I'm going to do? Ray's asked. Kian met his eyes. Exactly what you should do. Expose them. Ray's laughed. The sound was bitter, and hearing his own bitterness made it worse. You want me to dismantle the entire syndicate medical division. I want you to make them answer for what they did to you, Kian said, and to every other person they've modified without consent. Ray's stared at him. There are others? Kian pulled up another file on the tablet. More names. More authorization forms. Children as young as 2. Procedures ranging from hormonal suppression to genetic modification. All authorized by syndicate leadership. All buried in encrypted medical records. Ray's felt something cold settle in his chest. How many? 17 that I've found so far, Kian said. Probably more. Ray's sat down. The chair creaked. Another sound he'd never noticed before. He focused on it. Used it to ground himself while his brain tried to process the scope of what they were looking at. If I expose this, the syndicate will come after both of us, he said finally. I know. They'll use you as leverage. Use the baby. Kian's hand went to his stomach again. I know that too. Then why are you showing me this? Kian's voice went quiet. Because you asked me once what justice looks like. And I'm asking you the same thing now. Ray's looked at the tablet. At the names and dates and clinical descriptions of violence disguised as medicine. At proof that he wasn't the only one. That his father and the syndicate elders had built an entire system around controlling their own people before those people could choose who they wanted to be. He thought about the memo's language. Asset stability. Behavioral modification. Terms that stripped away humanity and replaced it with function. His voice came out rougher than before. Justice doesn't need to be loud. Kian tilted his head. What does that mean? Reyes stood, walked to the window. Outside, the city moved through its rhythms. Traffic, construction, life continuing without knowledge of what happened in syndicate back rooms. He heard all of it now. Every piece of noise that proved the world kept moving whether he was part of it or not. He turned back to Kian. It means we don't burn it down. We dismantle it, piece by piece. Quietly, Kian's expression shifted. How? The same way they built it, Reyes said. With paperwork. Can Reyes take down the syndicate without destroying himself in the process? Subscribe and hit the notification bell to find out what happens next. Share your reaction in the comments, your thoughts matter. The pressure came through phone calls first. Elder Tobias Vance showed up at Reyes' store on a Tuesday morning, flanked by 2 guards who looked uncomfortable being there. Reyes heard them before he saw them. Footsteps on gravel, low voices discussing whether to knock or wait. He opened the door before they decided. Tobias's eyebrows lifted slightly, but he recovered fast. Old syndicate training. Never show surprise. Reyes, we need to talk. Reyes stepped aside. Let them enter. The guard stayed by the door while Tobias moved into the living room like he owned it. He probably thought he did. Elders operated on the assumption that everything syndicate adjacent belonged to them by default. Tobias sat without being invited. You've been difficult to reach. Reyes stayed standing. I've been recovering. From what exactly? Tobias's tone was careful. Too careful. Surgery. What kind of surgery? Reyes let the silence stretch. Watched Tobias's face cycle through micro-expressions. Curiosity, concern, calculation. Finally, he said, medical privacy is still a thing even in syndicate families. Tobias's jaw tightened. Your father's colleagues are worried about you. My father's colleagues can schedule an appointment like everyone else. Reyes. Tobias leaned forward. There are questions. About your stability. About whether you're fit to continue leading operations. There it was. The real reason for the visit. They'd heard something. Maybe about the surgery. Maybe about the records. Either way, they were testing him. Reyes pulled out his phone. Typed something. Showed Tobias the screen. I know about the authorizations. All of them. Tobias went very still. His eyes scanned the message twice before he looked up. I don't know what you're talking about. Reyes typed again. 17 children. Modified without consent. You signed off on 6 of them. The color drained from Tobias's face. That's privileged medical information. Not anymore. Tobias stood. The guards shifted by the door, hands moving toward weapons they probably wouldn't use but wanted Reyes to see anyway. You're making a mistake. Reyes' voice was steady. The only mistake was thinking I wouldn't find out. What do you want? Resignations. From everyone who authorized procedures without consent. Effective immediately. Tobias laughed. Sharp. Disbelieving. You think they'll just step down because you ask? No, Reyes said. I think they'll step down because the alternative is having their names attached to medical malpractice lawsuits that will destroy their families' reputations for generations. Tobias's expression hardened. You're bluffing. Reyes pulled up another file on his phone. Showed him the screen. Legal documents. Already filed with 3 different jurisdictions. Names redacted, but the charge is clear. Unauthorized medical experimentation on minors. Conspiracy to commit assault. Violation of informed consent laws. Tobias read it. His hands started shaking. This will destroy the syndicate. Only the parts that deserve it. Reyes, listen to me. I'm done listening, Reyes said. That's the problem. You spent 26 years making sure I couldn't hear. Now you're going to deal with what happens when I do. Tobias opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the guards who were very carefully not looking back. Finally, he said, give me 48 hours. 24. That's not enough time. Then you'd better start making calls. Reyes walked to the door, opened it. Clock's already running. Tobias left without another word. The guards followed, and Reyes closed the door behind them. He stood there for a moment, listening to their footsteps fade, to the sound of car doors closing, to the engines starting and gravel crunching as they drove away. Kian emerged from the kitchen. "You heard all that?" Reyes nodded. "How do you feel?" "Terrified." Kian's mouth curved. "Good. That means you're taking it seriously." He crossed the room, stood next to Reyes at the window. "They'll push back. I know. Some of them will fight dirty. I'm counting on it," Reyes said. "The dirtier they fight, the more evidence we collect." Kian was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Someone called my clinic this morning. Wouldn't give a name. Said I should reconsider my associations." Reyes' jaw tightened. "They threatened you." "Implied it. Very politely." Kian's hand rested on his belly. "I told them I don't respond well to implications." Despite everything, Reyes almost smiled. "What did they say?" "Nothing. They hung up." Kian turned toward him. "But they'll try again, through different channels. I can move you somewhere safer." "No." Kian's voice was firm. "We agreed. We're doing this together." Reyes wanted to argue, wanted to wrap Kian in protection until this was over and the syndicate elders were too broken to retaliate. But Kian's expression made it clear the argument would be useless. Instead, Reyes said, "They're going to make me choose between you and the syndicate." "Then choose me," Kian said simply. Reyes stared at him. "You don't know what you're asking." "Yes, I do. I'm asking you to pick the person who asked permission over the people who never did." The simplicity of it hit harder than any threat to bias could have made. Reyes opened his mouth to respond, but his phone buzzed. Text message. "Unknown number. You have 12 hours to reconsider. After that, we stop asking nicely." He showed it to Kian. Kian read it, then pulled out his own phone. Started typing. "What are you doing?" Reyes asked. "Calling witnesses. If they want to play dirty, we make sure there's an audience." "Will the syndicate elders back down? Or are Reyes and Kian walking into an ambush?" Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Drop your predictions in the comments and help others see this story. The meeting room was too quiet. Reyes sat at the head of the table, 6 syndicate elders arranged on either side, and the silence felt different now. Before surgery, silence had been safety. Now it was a weapon pointed at him from every direction. Elder Vance sat directly across from him. To his left, Elder Chin. To his right, Elder Okoye. 3 more filled the remaining seats: Marcus, Delacroix, Santos. All of them over 60. All of them complicit. Reyes had requested the meeting. They'd agreed within an hour. Too fast. Which meant they'd already made their decision about how this would end. Mara sat in the corner with a tablet. Not officially part of the meeting, but present as medical counsel. That's what the invitation had said. Really, she was there as a witness. Kian was in the next room. Audio feed running to his phone, recording everything. Elder Chun spoke first. His voice was thin, reedy. "This is highly irregular, Reyes." Reyes' voice came out steady. 3 days of practice speaking had helped. "So is performing surgery on children without their consent." Silence. Then Elder Okoye leaned forward. "Those procedures were approved by legal guardians. Everything was done according to protocol." "Whose protocol?" Reyes asked. "Because it wasn't medical ethics boards. It wasn't family court. It was you. 6 people in a room deciding which children to modify because it made them easier to control." Elder Marcus's hands flattened on the table. "You're oversimplifying." "I'm clarifying," Reyes interrupted. "You took 17 children and surgically altered them, some as young as 2 years old. Without telling them, without asking, and you justified it by calling it operational necessity." Elder Delacroix's voice was cold. "Your father authorized your procedure because you were displaying concerning behavioral patterns. I was 3. You were dangerous." Reyes' laugh was sharp. "I was a toddler. The only thing dangerous about me was that I might grow up with opinions." Elder Santos stood. "This conversation is pointless. What's done is done." "Sit down," Reyes said quietly. Santos hesitated, then sat. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the air pressure had changed. Reyes pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. These are the files. Every authorization, every payment, every follow-up report documenting how well the procedures worked. No one touched the folder. I've already filed copies with 3 separate law firms, Reyes continued. Medical malpractice specialists. They're reviewing the cases now. You have 24 hours to resign voluntarily. After that, the lawsuits go public. Elder Vance's face had gone red. You can't do this. I already did. This will destroy syndicate credibility. Good, Reyes said. Maybe the next generation will build something better. Elder Chen's voice shook. Your father would never. My father is exactly why we're here. Reyes' hands were steady on the table. He made me a weapon before I could talk. You all watched. Some of you helped. And now you're upset that the weapon has opinions. Elder Okoye pushed the folder back across the table. We won't resign. Then you'll be removed. By who? You. Elder Okoye smiled. You have no authority here anymore, Reyes. The moment you filed those lawsuits, you lost syndicate protection. You're on your own. Reyes nodded slowly. I know. The elders exchanged glances. Elder Vance leaned back in his chair. Then this meeting is over. Not quite, Reyes said. He gestured toward the corner. Mara stood, tablet in hand. She pressed something on the screen, and the wall-mounted display flickered to life. Video footage, medical procedures, children strapped to examination tables, doctors injecting substances into small bodies while parents signed paperwork in adjacent rooms. Timestamps in the corner, dates spanning 15 years. The elders went pale. Where did you get that? Elder Marcus demanded. Doesn't matter, Reyes said. What matters is that it exists. And in about 6 hours, it's going to exist on every news outlet in the city. Elder Delacroix stood so fast his chair fell backward. You wouldn't. I already scheduled the release, Reyes said calmly. Unless you resign in the next 3 hours. Then I'll delay it. Indefinitely. The room erupted, voices overlapping, threats and accusations flying across the table. Reyes sat quietly and listened to all of it. Every word, every tremor of rage and fear. This was what sound gave him. The ability to hear people fall apart in real time. Elder Okoye slammed her hand on the table. This is blackmail. No, Reyes said. This is accountability. You just never had to deal with it before. Elder Chen's voice dropped to something dangerous. If you release that footage, we'll make sure you never hold power in this city again. I don't want power, Reyes said. I want you gone. The room went silent. Then Elder Vance spoke, and his voice was cold enough to freeze. What about the Omega? Reyes' pulse kicked. What about him? He's syndicate property, assigned to you under contract. If you're leaving syndicate protection, the contract becomes void. Vance smiled. Which means he goes back to the program. Reyes' hands curled into fists under the table. He's not property. According to syndicate law, he is, along with the child he's carrying. Every muscle in Reyes' body went rigid. Touch him, and I'll burn every single one of your families to the ground. Elder Okoye laughed. With what resources? You have no enforcers, no assets, no protection. You're one person making threats you can't back up. Reyes stood. Slowly, the room felt like it was holding its breath. I don't need enforcers, he said quietly. I have documentation. I have witnesses. And I have a very detailed list of every illegal thing each of you has done in the past 20 years. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to resign today, and you're going to leave Kian alone. Because if you don't, that footage goes live, along with everything else. He walked toward the door, stopped, looked back. You made me into something silent and controlled. You should have made me stupid too. He left before they could respond. In the hallway, Kian was waiting. His face was pale, but his eyes were sharp. Did it work? We'll find out in 3 hours, Reyes said. Kian grabbed his hand, squeezed hard. Whatever happens, the building shook. Not earthquake, explosion. Somewhere below them, Reyes heard it fully now. The blast, the crumbling, the screams. He grabbed Kian and ran. What just happened? And who's really pulling the strings? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the explosive finale. Comment your theories and share this story with others who need to see it. The explosion had come from the basement level. Reyes and Kian made it to the stairwell before the alarm started. The sound was piercing, something Reyes' newly restored hearing wasn't ready for. He grabbed Kian's hand and pulled him toward the exit, navigating through smoke that stung his eyes and chaos that felt choreographed. Too clean, too precise. They burst through the side door into an alley. 3 syndicate vehicles were already there, engines running. Guards emerging with weapons drawn. But they weren't aiming at Reyes. They were forming a perimeter, protecting. Elder Vance stepped out of the center vehicle. His face was covered in soot, but he was alive, breathing hard, and he was looking at Reyes with something that wasn't hatred anymore. It was fear. "It wasn't us," Vance said immediately. "The explosion, that wasn't us." Reyes' mind raced. Then who? Rival family, the Marcellos. They've been waiting for the syndicate to fracture. Vance wiped blood from a cut above his eye. "They knew you'd challenge the elders. They were counting on it." Behind Reyes, Kian made a sound. Not pain, understanding. "They wanted the syndicate destabilized," Kian said. "Reyes was just the excuse." Vance nodded. "If we'd killed you, the Marcellos would have moved in claiming justice. If you'd killed us, same result. Either way, they win." Reyes looked at the burning building, at the guards forming protective positions, at Elder Vance standing in front of him asking for something that looked suspiciously like help. "So what do you want from me?" Reyes asked. "Call off the footage release," Vance said. "Give us 24 hours to consolidate. Then we'll resign. All of us, quietly. But if that footage goes public now while we're weak, the Marcellos will take the entire syndicate apart." Reyes' jaw tightened. "You're asking me to trust you. I'm asking you to be strategic. You wanted us gone. We're going. But let us do it without handing the city to someone worse." Kian's hand tightened on Reyes. "It's your choice." Reyes looked at him, at the Omega who'd spent weeks fighting to give Reyes his hearing back, who'd stood beside him through every threat and revelation, who was now 8 months pregnant and covered in dust from an explosion meant to kill them both. Reyes turned back to Vance. "You resign within 48 hours. All of you. Public statements. No backroom deals. Agreed. And the medical files get sealed. Forever. No one else gets modified without consent. Ever." Vance hesitated, then nodded. "Agreed. And Kian stays with me. No contracts. No ownership. He's free." Vance looked at Kian, then back at Reyes. "Fine." Reyes pulled out his phone, canceled the scheduled footage release, sent a message to the law firms telling them to hold the lawsuits. Then he pocketed the phone and looked at Vance one last time. "If you betray this, I won't use lawyers next time." Vance smiled grimly. "I know." They left in separate vehicles. Reyes and Kian in an unmarked car driven by one of Mara's contacts. They didn't speak until they were 20 minutes outside the city, on a highway that stretched toward places the syndicate didn't control. Finally, Kian broke the silence. "Do you think they'll actually resign?" "Yes," Reyes said. "How do you know?" "Because I heard it." When Vance agreed, there was relief in his voice. "He's tired." Kian leaned his head against the window. "What happens now?" Reyes didn't have an answer. They'd dismantled a system that had controlled him his entire life. But the world was bigger than the syndicate, and he had no idea how to exist in it without the structure he'd been raised in. 3 weeks later, Kian went into labor. Reyes drove them to a clinic 2 hours outside the city. Not syndicate-affiliated. Just a small building with nurses who asked questions before acting and doctors who explained procedures instead of assuming consent. The labor lasted 6 hours. Reyes stayed the entire time, even when Kian told him he didn't have to. He held Kian's hand through contractions, watched monitors he was still learning to interpret, and listened to sounds he was still figuring out how to categorize. When the baby finally arrived, a boy, healthy, screaming, Reyes heard the heartbeat through the monitor before he saw anything else. Strong, fast, alive. The nurse placed the baby in Kian's arms. Kian looked exhausted and terrified and more beautiful than Reyes had ever seen him. He looked up at Reyes with wet eyes. "Do you want to hold him?" Reyes nodded, couldn't speak, took the tiny, warm weight into his arms and stared down at a face that looked nothing like him and everything like possibility. The baby made small sounds, breathing, existing. Reyes listened to all of it. "What are we going to name him?" Kian asked. Reyes thought about it, about silence and sound, about control and choice, about the fact that this child would grow up in a world where people asked before they acted, and that was the only legacy that mattered. "Ask him," Reyes said quietly, "when he's old enough to answer." Kian's laugh was soft, tired, perfect. "That's going to be a long wait." "I don't mind," Reyes said, and he didn't. Because for the first time in his life, waiting felt like a choice instead of a sentence. 6 months later, Elder Vance and the other syndicate leaders resigned. Quietly, no press conferences, just internal memos and power transitions that happened behind closed doors. The medical files stayed sealed. The lawsuits were quietly settled. The Marcellos never made their move. Turned out they'd been waiting for a war that never came. Reyes didn't return to the syndicate, didn't take over his father's position. Instead, he and Kian found a small house outside the city, raised the baby in a place where sound came from wind and rain and laughter instead of violence. Reyes' hearing never fully stabilized. Some days were better than others. Some days the world was overwhelming. But Kian learned which sounds grounded him, and Reyes learned which silences were chosen instead of forced. They built something new, not perfect, not easy, but theirs. And when the baby said his first word, clear and confident at 14 months old, Reyes heard it perfectly, not because his hearing was fixed, but because he'd finally learned how to listen. Thank you for joining us on Reyes and Kian's journey. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories that inspire. Share your thoughts in the comments about what this story meant to you. Your voice matters. And remember, the most powerful thing you can do is choose your own story. See you in the next one.